always call myself an accidental entrepreneur. I didn't kind of have an idea of a company that I wanted to start or anything like that. But I started in February of 2020.
Yeah.
So I thought the role was going to be in person, sitting next to my CEO, and then very quickly we moved completely remote. And so I had to learn a lot of this job kind of on the fly in isolation. I think of having AI as like a really smart intern, right?
Exactly.
So, if you can teach them well, they can do things that are repeatable for you. Their mandate is making sure that that person works in what we call their zone of genius. One thing we like to say in the community space a lot is nobody knows everything, but everybody knows something.
Yes.
And so if we're able to kind of harness that collective knowledge, everybody gets ahead.
Welcome to Executive Office Insights with your host, Diana Brandl, consultant and coach for executive support. I travel around the globe to bring you the most exciting voices in the industry in front of my microphone. Get inspired by insider knowledge, real success stories, and new perspectives on leadership and executive support. This was really a nice chat I had with Clara Ma, who is the founder and CEO of Ask a Chief of Staff, which is a bootstrapped community and recruiting platform for chief of staffs. And you know what? We were in the city center of New York City. Clara came over to meet me at my hotel. We were sitting at the terrace, and yep, you do hear the New York City sound in the background. And that is just the perfect setting for such a vibrant conversation I had with Clara. So you're going to hear a lot about the role of chief of staffs, the misunderstandings, the community she built, and so much more. So thanks so much for coming over, Clara. Really enjoyed the talk with you.
Okay, everybody, I'm recording my last podcast while in the US, and maybe you can hear it a little bit. We have some New York vibe going on, and I'm very excited to have the wonderful Clara over. Clara, a true New Yorker, or what brought you to the city?
No, I'm not an original New Yorker. I'm actually originally from California in the Bay Area. Grew up there, went to school out there, and eventually made the big move out to New York, almost 10 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Just about. I think a little bit less just because I did 2 years of nomadic remote travel.
Okay.
But almost a decade in New York now.
So you can call yourself kind of a true New Yorker now. You know every corner. So what's a part that you always love to give out as an advice for a visitor like me?
I think the food scene is just so incredible, right? You can have pretty much any cuisine that you can think of in New York. And so I always encourage people to eat their way through New York.
It's so true. And I don't know what, I'm not going to go looking at the scale when I come back, probably, but it's always, dangerous going to the US because also the food scene in California, where I just came from, is always very, very tempting. So, I really wanted to record this here in New York because I love to meet the people live, and even if we have the noise out here, that's the city, that belongs to the city. So every one of you out there listening to our episode, get the New York vibe. I hope you have the city on your radar this year. It's always good to be back. So, and I know you have a very busy schedule. See, that's exactly happening, but we're going to keep it in. I know you had a very busy schedule this week, so I'm glad you made it out here because you just got back from Canada and there was a summit you hosted. So, of course, we need to know everything about that.
Yes, it's been a big year of travel already.
Right.
But one of the things that I really love is also meeting people in person, right?
Good.
Just like we're doing this podcast in person. I run a chief of staff community with over 500 members.
Wow.
And we are international technically. A lot of us are based here in the US. And so I always try to find excuses to bring people together so that they can actually meet each other offline, talk to each other. So last week I was in Ottawa, Canada, leading a chief of staff workshop there. And then just on Monday of this week, before we are recording, we ran our first ever inaugural New York City Ask a Chief of Staff Summit. I know, a mouthful, but it was a chance for us to bring together 50 chiefs of staff.
Really good.
We did a workshop, we did problem-solving labs, networking, and I think the people really enjoyed it. They said that this was something that was built for the chief of staff in mind, and they were able to learn a lot from both each other as well as their speakers.
And were you very specific in terms of who has access to that? Because we have a lot of misunderstanding between EA roles, senior EA roles, and chief of staffs. So how did you pick the right people to be there?
Yeah, we obviously took a look at their LinkedIn profiles, their
Right.
careers. Some people are doing the chief of staff role without the title, so we wanted to make sure those
Yes.
folks were included as
Good.
well, and also give them some tips and tricks on how to land that title if that
Yeah.
was something that was interesting to them. So it was a group of 50. We would make sure that we approved everybody that came through.
Nice.
And I think what was great was getting to meet other chiefs of staff in person.
Absolutely. So do you plan more of these events?
Ask me again in about 3 months. I think I'm still recovering from this summit. I mean, originally we were supposed to do this summit in February,
Okay.
but a big blizzard came through, so we ended up postponing till April. It was a blessing in disguise. The weather is a little bit nicer, obviously. With a snowstorm, nobody can get anywhere.
Yeah. True point.
But now I'm feeling a lot of relief that the first one went so well, and I think we'll regroup in about 3 months and see when we might want our next one to be.
And are you all by yourself? Are you a solopreneur? Or is there a team behind you?
I am a solopreneur, although I do have contractors that help
Right.
me on a project basis or on a quarterly basis.
Yeah.
So depending on the ebbs and flows of the company, we'll have more or less people on the team.
Same with me. When I started my own business 10 years ago, I always work with freelancers. I have Sebastian who does the podcast. So good luck with the background noise, Sebastian. But I know you will do your magic. And my husband is part of the company now. So that makes it
amazing.
very, very easy for me. He takes care of all the finance part. So yeah, slowly growing, which is always nice.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and your professional background. How did it all start? And was there a special thing you had on your mind when you were a little child, like what you wanted to become? I wanted to become a flight attendant.
I think when I was a kid, I wanted to be a scientist.
Oh,
Much
nice.
to my father's chagrin, I did not end up pursuing that route. But I would say that I always call myself an accidental entrepreneur. I didn't kind of have an idea of a company that I wanted to start or anything like that.
Right.
But like I said today, I run Ask a Chief of Staff. It's a platform dedicated to uplifting and demystifying the chief of staff role.
Good.
And it was really born out of my own experiences being a chief of staff. Prior to being a chief of staff, I worked mostly at startups. I did a lot of recruiting, hiring, things like that, and then made my way into operations work. So how to build functions from scratch, how to standardize playbooks, make sure everybody's doing the same things over and over again, right, with some sort of standard.
Right.
And found out that I wanted to continue to have a very wide skill set, but sit closer to leadership, which is what made me decide, okay, I'm going to go after a chief of staff role now. The chief of staff role I had was at a Series A AI startup, and it was the best role I've ever had, the most transformational, but also the most challenging. It's
Can only imagine the working hours, right, with a startup.
Exactly.
I've been there myself.
And also, in addition to that, I started in February of 2020.
Yeah.
So I thought the role was going to be in person, sitting next to my CEO, and then very quickly we moved completely remote.
Right.
And so I had to learn a lot of this job kind of on the fly in isolation. And so fast forward, about 3 years after my chief of staff role, I found that I kept thinking about chief of staff stuff. I thought about how much I loved the role, but wanted more resources around it. And that's what motivated me to start Ask a Chief of Staff.
Fantastic. I love how these visions, are created and then you actually start your own business. It's incredible. So congratulations so far on everything you've been doing. And I think it was just the beginning, what we've seen. And you're very active on LinkedIn. Very inspiring. Lots of people are following you. You build really that community that was needed. So we know that chief of staffs, oh my God, there's not that typical job description. Every chief of staff is different. So what were your focus areas back then in the days when you started with the first role?
Yeah, I would say that I was on the COO light track, if you will. Our company was 10 people when I started. I like to say I was employee number 7 through 10, depending on when we walked in the door that day. And everybody on the team was either an engineer or scientist, right? This was a highly technical AI startup, which meant that everything that was business operations, finance, accounting, HR people kind of fell on me and the CEO. And we didn't have a COO at the company. So I was playing this role where I was supporting my CEO, working with him on all the things that he needed to get done. But we would also tag team a lot of the role in the sense that, there were certain functions that needed to be built up from scratch and we didn't have a COO to do that. So I sort of leaned into that as well. So
huge opportunity for you.
Absolutely. Huge opportunity, huge learning curve.
Right.
One of the stories I like to tell is that day 2 of my role, one of our employees came up to us and he was like, my wife had a baby last week. What's our parental leave policy?
Oh, wow. And there was none.
There was none. We hadn't experienced anything like that before. We were 10 people. So I was like, okay, I don't know, but I'm going to figure it out. And ended up tapping into my network, talking to the head of HR at previous companies, trying to figure out what the best practices were, knowing that what I set in place today, while it may change in the future, was going to be the foundation of what this parental leave policy could look like. So it was a high growth, high learning curve role, but it was one that I think set me up ultimately for entrepreneurship down the line.
And was it for your executive back then, the first chief of staff that he had or she had?
Yes, it was the first one that he had. He hired on this role right after they had raised their Series A. Mm-hmm. So it was a great opportunity for him to start to think about, okay, where do I want to focus my time? What can I delegate? And how can I have a support system around me so that I'm not stuck doing everything that's non-technical? Because he was technically still a very technical co-founder of the company, but wanted to be able to lean into both sides of the business.
Okay. So what would you say are the most things that are so hard to understand about the role of a chief of staff? We do see a lot of noise on LinkedIn. There's always the story connected to the EA role. Help us explain and lead us through this jungle. How would you explain it to someone that is not aware of this role?
Yeah, absolutely. So the main thing that I say is that a chief of staff works in support of a principal, right? It's generally an executive. It could be the CEO. It could be the leader of a different division or function at a company.
Right.
And their mandate is making sure that that person works in what we call their zone of genius. Mm-hmm. So why is this CEO or executive the only person who is leading this company? And how can they spend their time doing the things that they are best at and only they can do? So, for example, at an early stage startup, maybe the CEO is the only person who can really do fundraising, right? Typically, they have to be the ones getting in front of the investors, things like that. So if the CEO wants to spend about 50% of their time talking to investors and going down the fundraising route, what are all the other things that would potentially take up their mind share that can now be delegated to a chief of staff? Mm-hmm. They need to be able to execute on an executive level, but not have those things done by the executive themselves.
Absolutely. And, and as we said before, we have back in Germany, we have a certification program where I'm part of the trainer team, which is a half-a-year program in collaboration with a university, a management university. And it's just fantastic to see what, types of personalities are coming. Yes, we do have some senior EAs that work strategically already, but we have head of strategies, we have PMOs, and so many different people. So do you see that in the US as well, especially now that you just came back from running the summit? I mean, what profiles we see there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that's great about a chief of staff role is that there's no one right profile.
Exactly.
People can come from a lot of different backgrounds. And what's important is to figure out how do you translate those skills into your chief of staff role, right? So instead of just thinking about, okay, I'm planning an offsite, instead thinking about it from an executive lens of, okay, what is this offsite trying to accomplish? What are we trying to do strategically and also long-term vision? Is this offsite for culture and morale? Is this for planning strategically for the rest of the year? Is this a reset post layoff? Whatever that is. So figuring out, okay, I'm working on a variety of projects as anybody in a company. And if you want to make that leap to the chief of staff role, really starting to think, okay, how does what I do play into the bigger picture?
Right.
And how do I keep this high-low view, right? How can I see the 10,000 foot view, but also understand what's going on in the weeds and how do those things work together?
Absolutely. I know a lot of people keep telling me when they think of doing the chief of staff certification in Germany we offer this with a very high level agency and training company in collaboration with the university. They always say, oh, but I'm not good with numbers. I'm not good with data. Would you say, well, that's one of the core things you see as a chief of staff? You need to dive into those numbers and do the, analysis.
Yeah. So I have two responses to that. One, I think what makes a great chief of staff is that they're unafraid to jump into things that they might not know.
Right.
And it's not that you need to be an expert in anything in particular, but it's helpful if you have frameworks on how do you learn things, right? Most likely, I would say about 50% of the things you do as a chief of staff, you've never had exposure to or if you've never led, but do you have a way to get that information and knowledge? And that's what I think really makes a standout chief of staff. The other part is different companies and different principals are going to want different skill sets.
True.
Where I was a chief of staff, you may not have liked to be a chief of staff, and where you might want to be a chief of staff, I might not like it either. So there's a lot of different skill sets that are necessary at different stages and sizes of companies. before I became a chief of staff, the previous company that I'd worked at called AngelList, the CEO of the division that I worked under was actually looking for a chief of staff, and he wanted someone who was very analytical, data heavy, Excel driven. That is not me. I mean, I'm like looking at an Excel spreadsheet and like my eyes start to glaze over. So I knew that that wasn't the position for me, but I knew that I could be a good chief of staff somewhere else.
Right.
And as a chief of staff at a Series A AI startup, I was able to manage our finance and accounting firm. We had a third party that did that. Right. So I could speak the language, I could know what to look for, but I didn't have to actually be in the weeds of the numbers, which was great for me. And what I really focused on, at least for the first 6 months I was there, was hiring and recruiting. We had raised a massive Series A. We needed to pretty much triple our headcount. And so I spent a lot of time there, and my recruiting background really came into play.
Perfect.
So I think that, having a understanding of a lot of these skill sets is important. You should be able to translate across different functions, but it's okay if you don't, if you're not an Excel wizard or, anything in particular.
I totally agree. I'm glad you're saying that because I run away when I see numbers. I'm happy that I have a good network, and especially now my husband takes care of that. But tell me a little bit about when the vision came to your own company. And if you look back at it, I mean, for sure, the summit now and being in Canada, working with incredible clients, some of the milestones you want to share with us.
Yeah. So in terms of founding Ask a Chief of Staff, I would say, like I said, I feel like I'm an accidental entrepreneur. After I was a chief of staff, I actually ended up going to another startup where I was the head of community for actually the very first iteration of a chief of staff network community type of thing. Right. It was with a company called On Deck, and I was hired on to lead the chief of staff community that they had started building. And I grew that community from about 80 to 400 people while I was there.
Oh, that's strong numbers.
Yeah, it was a really, thank you. It was a really great trajectory, and it gave me my first taste of, okay, what does it look like to manage a community? Right. Really loved it. But at the end of my time there, I was feeling pretty burnt out from working at a ton of different startups. And so I always knew that upon leaving On Deck, I was going to give myself like a self-proclaimed sabbatical. Good. Take some time to, travel, just decompress, things like that. And as I was traveling for about 3 months, I really found myself continuing to think about the chief of staff role. I really felt like my work in the space wasn't quite done yet. And let me tell you, when you are traveling in Spain by yourself and you're having tapas for one, you have a lot of time to reflect and figure out what it is that you want to do. And so my brain just kept coming to chief of staff stuff. I wanted to continue to build in the space, and I was trying to figure out, okay, like what could I possibly do to continue working in that space? Eventually, the 3 months came to an end, and I figured, okay, well, I really love that I'm able to travel. How can I extend my personal runway so that I can keep doing this? And how can I tie in all this chief of staff experience and knowledge that I have? And when I first started Ask a Chief of Staff, we were purely a recruiting agency. Recruiting is something that is pretty high margin. It doesn't take a lot of operational spin up. And so I could start reaching out to my network on LinkedIn, see who was hiring for a chief of staff, and then start reaching out to my network, see who wanted a job. And so I figured, okay, well, if I can make a couple of placements, this was October of 2022, couple of placements by the end of the year, one placement, let's call it. I think I can continue to travel and live my nomadic life.
Right. Like me, I'm a nomad for 5 years now.
Yeah.
Yep, throughout Europe.
So much fun. You get to see so many different places, explore so many new cultures, foods, people, all that kind of stuff. And so,
although it's hard to say you're leaving New York. I mean, some people would love to come here, but I'm sure that it's like, sometimes you have to return to really value the city, probably, right? And to really remember, like, hey, what a great place I'm here.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was great to just get a little bit of space as well. Right. And also, there's so much of the world that I hadn't seen yet. And I still haven't seen. I still continue to want to see. So lo and behold, I ended up making 3 placements before the end of the year. And I said, okay, I think this business, if you will, has legs. I had started a business bank account, separating out my finances, things like that. And so I figured, okay, come January 2023, I'm going to go all in on this. I'm going to really try to turn this into a platform as opposed to just a boutique recruiting agency. And then fast forward to about March of that year, we started the community side of our business.
Fantastic. And it's so rewarding to have this community. I can only imagine, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been really gratifying to see people who have gone through the same experiences I have.
Right.
It's helpful to bring people together. One thing we like to say in the community space a lot is nobody knows everything, but everybody knows something.
Yes.
And so if we're able to kind of harness that collective
Totally.
knowledge, everybody gets ahead.
And everyone, please check out the show notes. Of course, we will make sure you see all the links connected to Clara and the community if you want to be part of it, because you said it's international.
Yes, it is international.
Also, our European listeners are more than welcome to check it out. So help me explain your criteria when you find a good match for a chief of staff and a CEO. How did you, go into this field?
Yeah, I would say that it's very much like matchmaking. It's a little bit like dating in a sense, right? Finding the right match. So of course, there's the things that the CEO will want on paper, right? Some of the hard skills, some of the things that are must have that they definitely need help with in the next 30, 60, 90 days. And then one step further is, okay, what are the personality types that you like to work with, right? How do you receive feedback? How do you communicate?
Good.
And making sure that the candidates that we're submitting also fit that criteria. Sometimes it can be things like, okay, I really need someone who has been at a startup before, right? They can understand the kind of chaos. Other times it's like, oh, okay, I'm mostly a night owl. I like to work late at night, so I need somebody who's going to be able to match my hours.
Yes.
So getting one level deeper beyond just the things on paper that they want and understanding, okay, where can we find these people? Then it's about going out to our network, vetting, interviewing, and sourcing the right people to submit over to those clients.
And how do you help, CEOs to really navigate? Do I need a good strategic EA, or do I need a chief of staff, or maybe I need both of them? So what are the kind of the conversation you are having at the moment when we look into a very tough market in terms of costs, reducing and, layoffs and everything? So what would you say is to focus more on the EA role or more on the chief of staff role?
Yeah, I think that ultimately depends on where they need the most help, right? So when we sit down with an executive and we start to ask them, okay, where do you feel like you're spending your time and where would you like to be spending your time? If they're coming back to us and saying like, I'm just spending so much time in my inbox, I feel like I'm scheduling all of my own meetings, or that, I don't have a good grasp on my email, it's just like all over the place, we say, okay, I think you just need to hire a really great EA first.
Absolutely.
And then once you hire EA for the next 6 months, then we can talk about hiring a chief of staff. But if they're really looking at things like, okay, I really need a strategic thought partner. I want someone to kind of spar with, be my sounding board. I want them to be able to lead initiatives from inception all the way to execution. That's where we say, okay, a chief of staff is probably the right fit for you at this time. So we have consulted with CEOs who want to hire a chief of staff, but ultimately we direct them to hire an EA first and then come back to us. There's nothing wrong with hiring an EA first, right? It means that you suddenly free up your time to work on the strategic stuff. And then maybe you do want more support there later. But I think taking care of the things that are kind of most urgent are always going to be better, as opposed to, okay, I'm going to hire a chief of staff and I'm going to give them a lot of the administrative work.
Right.
They're not going to be happy, and you're also going to be potentially overpaying them for a skill set that somebody else could be doing for less.
I agree. So have you seen a lot of transformations from EA roles within the same company going into a chief of staff role? And are you there coaching them and supporting them? Or would you say, actually, I'd rather see chief of staffs coming from external. They have it easier to jump into a new role, because some of the EAs keep telling me back in Germany, like, well, it's nice that I can have this career path in my company, but for some of them, I'm still the EA role, right?
Yeah, I think that that's the main problem that people run into, is that if you want to transition from an EA to a chief of staff, your EA responsibilities have to go somewhere.
Right.
And I think that's the thing that a lot of people forget, is that they're like, oh, I can just move on to my chief of staff role, but who is going to take care of all the things that you were doing before, right? So either you need to hire somebody, to backfill you, or you can automate a lot of things now, which is, a different capability that we didn't have a few years ago.
Exactly.
Or you can delegate to other people on the team, right? So somehow you need to figure out how those responsibilities will translate to the next generation so that you are able to fill in the chief of staff shoes now. Otherwise, you will continue to get saddled with that EA role. I also ask principals when they are transitioning their EA to a chief of staff to make a formal announcement to everybody and say, I'm promoting this person into a chief of staff role. This is what you should expect from them now. This is what you should go to them, and kind of rescope the role so that everybody in the company sees them in a new light, so that they are able to make that transition successfully as well.
I agree. So would you say that CEOs are really open to talk to people like you, that helping them to find the right matches? And what are usually the questions you hear from the CEOs, when you consult with them?
Yeah, I would say that why CEOs come to us is because we specialize in the chief of staff hiring process, right? So with any other role, you can usually run a pretty repeatable process, and you might hire, 10 engineers in a quarter,
True.
or multiple customer success people in a quarter. But typically, you're hiring one chief of staff, and it's every 2 to 3 years. So most recruiters don't have the reps to hire a great chief of staff just because they haven't gone through these kinds of profiles before. And that's why executives will come to us, because we've done this multiple times. We've done the matching process, and now we have a pretty good idea of how to go through the interview process. We even help coach on what that process should look like.
I love that.
Things like that, so that both candidate and client get a good
full
experience.
service, I would say. It's wonderful to see that they trust your service and they get you on board early enough to find the right match. So when you look back at the matches you found, is there a specific pattern you've discovered, where you feel like, oh yeah, that worked out pretty well and pretty fast?
Yeah, I mean, thankfully, all of the chiefs of staff that we've placed have stayed on with their principals for years at this point.
Very good.
And what we find is that they are able to build rapport in the interview process. It's not, day one, let's start building trust, but instead they've already started to build trust within the interview process, and they're getting sort of a chemistry check along the way. And that's something that we really value. I know it sometimes can feel weird to say, like, what does your gut say when it comes to your career, right? And the role that you're taking on. But I always tell people, if you're interviewing for a chief of staff role and your intuition is telling you, I don't know if I should be here, take that intuition and interview with the next person, because anything that you're feeling that's off is going to be amplified tenfold once you actually start in the role. And everybody's on their best behavior when they're interviewing, right?
Of course, both sides.
Exactly. And everyone's trying to downplay the things that are difficult and, really upplay the things that are pros about this job. And if you are feeling like there's not the right vibe when you're interviewing with this person, it's going to be very hard to overcome that later on.
Yeah.
And so all the matches that we've made that are successful, the team has been really excited to bring this person on. The candidate themselves have been like, I can really see myself fitting in there. I feel like I can get along with my principal really well already. And having that kind of extra cherry on top of everything that they've already done in the interview, of course, has led to really successful partnerships.
Well done. Very good. I love to hear that. So, of course, AI is everywhere. I mean, I can only imagine you probably have covered it during the summit as well. So what would you say? Is there anything that chief of staff should be aware of or prepared for when it comes to AI and embracing it?
I really think that chiefs of staff need to be AI literate. I mean, given all the capabilities that different softwares, platforms have, it can really make your life a lot easier to just be able to gather information and context faster, right? Ultimately, the chief of staff is going to be the one, like, you have a ton of information. How do you put it all together? How does it all connect? I don't think that aspect of the chief of staff role is ever going away, but it can help make you more efficient. It can help you with your own scheduling, right? Build your
agents.
Yeah, your agents, the tasks that you can automate, the things that you can delegate to somebody else. I think of having AI as like a really smart intern, right? So, if you can teach them well, they can do things that are repeatable for you. And I would say that with more and more chief of staff job descriptions we're seeing, being AI literate is almost a must-have now, right?
Of course, AI and digital literature, but what would you say are also kind of very important strengths for the future, the skill sets that are needed? And hopefully you're going to mention some soft skills as well, because I think that's also the nice combination that chief of staffs need to have, right?
Yeah. I'll start with a quote-unquote harder skill, and then, of course, the soft skills are things that I like to talk about the most often. So in addition to AI literacy, go-to-market skills and experience are super important as well, right? With the way that the economy is, companies are no longer investing in potential outcomes, but how is this company going to make money? And so being able to take a product to market, or figure out, okay, how can we make this product financially viable, is super important. And so any chief of staff candidates with that kind of background are really starting to stand out in this job market. And then, of course, the soft skills, or as I like to call them, people skills, I think are the most important for chiefs of staff.
I love that, to call them human skills, by the way. So that's a nice fit.
Exactly. I mean, I don't think there's anything easy or soft about being able to communicate well, to be able to read the room, right? And understand when it's the right time to make your voice heard versus when it's time to have a private conversation. Having very, very strong discernment is a big part of being a chief of staff as well. So, a chief of staff cannot be an office gossip. They cannot play the political game.
No agenda.
No agenda. And I would say that this is a very emotionally heavy role. And so knowing that you have your own tactics and frameworks of how to manage your emotions and also manage the emotions of people around you is so important.
So would you say that this is also the kind of answers you just gave that I would hear from a CEO? But of course, as we heard earlier, everyone has a different, orientation towards hiring a chief of staff. But what do you hear from the C-suite at the moment where they feel like, no, there needs to be the analytical skills and the strategic skills. And of course, someone very strong in project management. Is it something that you hear? Because that's what I hear back home in Europe.
Yeah. So we always go back to what are your top priorities, right? Yeah. What are the priorities that you need done at this current stage of your company? And we use that to determine what the skill sets are, right? So start with the problem and then find the skill sets instead of the other way around. Because if you try to find someone with a specific set of skills, but they don't match what it is that are the biggest fires that you're trying to put out, then it doesn't matter who you bring into the role. They're not going to be successful. So yeah, we always try to understand the bigger picture of what's going on at the company, why they're deciding to bring a chief of staff on now. Is it a capacity issue? Is it an efficiency issue? Is it a strategy issue, right? What are the things that the executive is currently dealing with? And then we'll use that to distill down into what the skill sets are.
Very good. How long is usually a process in finding the right match? What is your experience from the past years?
Yeah, I mean, we always say we can move as fast as the CEO is willing to interview, right? Their schedule is the one that's usually the blocker.
And sometimes that's the first issue you have, right?
Exactly. And so when we work with CEOs, we ask them point blank, like, how much time do you have to spend on this search, right? We can do a search as quickly as 3 weeks because we have a great slate of candidates. We can cherry pick which ones we think are best and start you interviewing with them right away. But we've had processes that take 3 months because the team is slower to respond to candidates. Candidates get snapped up by the market. So anybody who's looking to hire chief of staff, we ask them, okay, when do you want to hire the chief of staff by? If it's within the next 6 months, we'll usually say, okay, let's check back in about a quarter and see, because what you need now and what you need 6 months from now can look very different in a person. And also, if you don't have the time to invest in the search, how are you going to have time to invest in the onboarding of this person, right? You want to set this person up for success from the very beginning.
Clara, what is your wish for the CEO, Chief of Staff partnerships in the future? What is something that you feel like, I really, really hope that this is going to last, when you have this match and they start working. So what is something you usually give both of them on their way?
I would say that I would want CEOs to invest in their chiefs of staff as much as chiefs of staff are investing their time in working with the CEO, right? I think that many CEOs hire chiefs of staff out of need and necessity. And of course, that makes a ton of sense. But also realizing that the chief of staff has nobody to advocate for them other than themselves. And so I always encourage CEOs to think about, okay, what is this role in the long term? Do you see this as a 2-year tenure and then you are going to graduate the chief of staff? Do you see this person sitting alongside you long term as you move potentially from company to company and you grow in the role? The answer that they have doesn't have to be the set in stone. That's definitely what's going to happen. But I would like to see that CEOs have given a bit of thought into what the future of their chief of staff looks like, because that amount of care will be paid back to them tenfold.
Totally. And you want to keep them. You want to give them the next career step. So what is it usually that you see what's coming next, and how long do you usually see chief of staffs in their roles? Because that's a question I usually get asked. Like, 3 years, is that okay? Should I then go for the next step? And is it like, leading in a department? Is it a COO role? So what do you see out there in the market? What's your advice? If there's a kind of advice. Everyone has a different career path, obviously.
What's great about the chief of staff role is that the world is your oyster, right? You really can do anything you want afterwards. There's a couple of pathways that we see are most typical. One is becoming the head of a function at the current company that you're at. Because you've seen so much of the different parts of the company, you're able to hone in on, here are the things that I really enjoy doing and here are the things that I don't enjoy doing. And those may create clear buckets for you to then think about, okay, what if I spend all of my time in this specific function? So I've seen chief of staff kind of graduate into a head of department role. Then I've also seen a lot of chiefs of staff graduate into entrepreneurship or founding their own companies, right? It's a very natural transition given that they've sat next to a leader, they've seen how decisions are made. Now maybe they're ready to kind of pull the trigger.
Happened to me.
Exactly, same. And now they're ready to become, the founders and operators of their own companies. So that's another pathway. More and more so, I'm actually seeing career chiefs of staff. So what that could mean is, one, you either follow your principal, right? Maybe they go to a new company and then you follow them. So you are chief of staff again, but at a new organization. Or, with family offices or, high net worth individuals, their chiefs of staff may stay with them for 5 to 10 years even, right? Because that organization is continuing to change and grow, and the role is going to continue to change and grow as well. So I really don't think there's one right pathway, but what I encourage chiefs of staff to do is, every 3 months or so, kind of sit down and just do some reflection on what did you like about the last quarter? What didn't you like? Are there things you want to spend more time on? Are there things you want to learn? As a chief of staff, no part of the organization is off limits to you. So how can you utilize that viewpoint and that perspective that you have to help build your career in the places that you want to go next?
Very good advice. Thank you so much for that. I mean, do you think that, like, when we're looking into the next 5 years and we've seen a lot of change, of course, the pandemic was there. Now we have, the tough dynamic times regarding economies. So what do you think is going to affect the future of the relationship of a chief of staff and the CEO? Do we going to see more hybrid, or do we actually going to see more people coming back to the companies? What do you hear from your clients? They want to have their on-site chief of staff, or do they give them flexibility? I always get this question, like, can I actually perform a role as a chief of staff when I'm fully remote?
Yeah, I mean, my short answer is like, yes, you can. It's just a intentionality between the communications of the principal and the chief of staff, right? I started my chief of staff role in February of 2020. I thought I was going to be in person. Very quickly, a month later, we were not in person anymore. My CEO moved to Miami. I was in New York. So we had to be very intentional about what our touch points are. I think one of the benefits of being in office is that you have a lot more serendipity, that you can like run into someone, you can overhear a conversation. I can literally look over my CEO's shoulder at his computer screen and what he's doing. But that's not to say you can't replicate those things. You just have to be very thoughtful about it. So there was one chief of staff and principal pairing where they worked actually on different coasts. So one was in San Francisco, one was in New York. And they would basically have a scheduled phone call every time when the principal was leaving the office. They would do a phone call and just debrief on the day. It was like unstructured, just kind of free flow talking. But what was helpful about that was that it was just contextually great for the chief of staff to be able to kind of download all that information. So, I mean, I think the battle between like remote, hybrid, return to office, it's ultimately a personal preference of the executive. And so if the executive is okay with remote, then, they're going to build a remote relationship. If they really want to be in office, then their chief of staff is going to have to be in office. Like there's just no choice because of the working preferences of the executive.
So what do you see more at the moment? Is there a tendency of like coming back?
It's pretty mixed, honestly. It's a mixed bag. I mean, here in New York, there are companies who are based here and they have office space. So obviously they want to utilize it. But we're seeing plenty of roles that are either hybrid or even fully remote, remote within the same time zone, things like that. Okay. I do think that remote does open up the talent pool a little bit more. So, that gives you a wider candidate pool to choose from. And then, remote it doesn't mean you never see each other, right? Build in touch points of like quarterly check-ins, or maybe you travel and you meet your executive, things like that. It's really been a mixed bag.
Yeah, that's what I see also back in Europe. So we're coming to an end with our discussion. I want to hear a little bit more about the private Clara. I mean, what's your favorite neighborhood? Where do you hang out in New York? What do you enjoy outside of work?
Yeah, I mean, I have been falling deep into the pickleball rabbit hole. So I've been playing a lot of pickleball with friends, especially now as the weather is starting to get nicer. We can hopefully play outside. I also grew up dancing, so I love taking dance classes, going to dance socials, things like that. The thing about New York is like the whole city is your playground. You can do any sort of art, you can do any sort of activity, fitness, sports, whatever it is. And so I really love to spend time just with friends doing different activities. I think as much as I'm a community builder for my business, I'm very much a community builder within my friend group. And we always try to get together to do something, whether it's taking a class together, having a craft day together, or just like hanging out and just doing whatever, yapping, gossiping, just doing friend things. I really try to keep my social life as full as my work life.
Perfect. And it's good to be away from the computer, right? Once in a while.
Absolutely. I try to really put my computer away as much as possible if I can.
Very good. Very good advice. So last question for you, and I wonder what song is going to end up on our Spotify list for you, because you just mentioned the dancing.
Yeah.
So what is the favorite song you love to dance and you want to share with us?
I think the only appropriate song, given that we are two female entrepreneurs, is Run the World by Beyonce.
Yes.
So I will give that to you. That's like my hype up song before I have to do a speaking engagement or, have a big day. I try to play that song to pump myself
choice.
up.
We don't have it yet, which is great. With pleasure, I'm going to put it on the list. And, I'm running my online summit next week, and we have this playlist running. So, of course, I will think of you when we have this song on. And thank you so much for doing this on this special patio outside the Times Square. It's a beautiful weather. It's chilly. Yep, it is a bit chilly, but we have a blue sky. And it was really a pleasure talking to you, Clara.
The pleasure was all mine, and good luck with the summit.
Thank you.
That was Executive Office Insights, the podcast for everyone shaping the future of the modern office. I hope you found valuable insights and inspiration for your own journey. If you enjoyed this episode, I would truly appreciate a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform. Not only does it support me, but it also helps others discover the podcast and benefit from these exciting conversations. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode, and feel free to share it with anyone interested in executive support, leadership, and modern office management. Thank you for tuning in, and see you in the next episode of Executive Office Insights.